making a forest scene, and I'll show you guys a few tricks you guys can use to optimize the scene, get it to perform better, to look nicer, and so let's get started with it. And just to let you guys know, a lot of the assets I'll be using today, these assets are, in fact all of them are actually free. Some of them are provided by Epic, like I have this palm tree, this one from the vehicle demo, and then these two I got from a separate software. They came pre-made as well. So most of these assets can be acquired for free. I'll leave the links in the description for you guys, and let's get started with it. So first thing we will do is I'll go to the landscape tool down here. Now I do have a landscape material. I also did not make that, it was free. But for this example I'll show you guys this. So I'll just create a landscape, just choose a material, though this material is a landscape specific material, so I can paint a landscape, but this will be a topic for a different video. And I'm just gonna create some white layers. Okay, so first thing obviously we want to do is you guys can use height maps as well. You guys can, if you guys have a height map, for example, a real world location or anything, you guys can go to when you are making your landscape, you guys can import from file, and the z-axis is the one you want to look out for. So you don't want too much on the z-axis because your landscape might be really distorted. So keep a lookout for that. I'm just gonna paint the base material all over the texture, all over the landscape, so the base. Okay, and once I have done that, that's fine. And now if you guys want to edit how your landscape looks, what you guys need to do, you guys can go to the sculpt tool here. You guys can sculpt. There's a lot of options here. You guys can do smooth, flat, ramp, erosion. For this, what I'll first do is I'll just sculpt something. So if I just like drag my mouse around here, the ground goes up. If I do shift click, the ground goes down. Then I can also go to sculpt and smooth. If I use a smooth tool, it tries to level off the surface quite nicely. Or what you can also do is you guys can use a flat tool, flatten, yeah, and now everything is, or should be, quite back to normal. And you guys can of course change the size of the brush right here. So this is the brush size. So the bigger the brush, the more area it covers, but if depending on your scene, it could take longer to do whatever you're trying to perform as well. So it's a good idea to keep the brush at a decent size, decent size. So sculpt, yeah, you guys can sculpt around, and all these things can be really useful. But what I want to show you guys here is actually using the so if I go to my meshes, and if I have, for example, this palm tree. Now first thing you can do is you guys can just drag it into your scene to get the estimate of the size, because unless you guys make these yourself, you won't really know how big they really are in your scene. And then you can go on from deciding there how much what size you want the instances to be. Okay, so first thing we will look at is if you guys are just using a single tree, for example, in a scene, or separate trees but you're planting them out one by one, you want to make sure that the collision is done properly. So if you go click on collision here, this looks pretty good, but if you guys have made the model yourself, for example, and you can't figure out how to do the collision properly, you guys can go to the collision complexity, and you guys can choose complex as simple, and it will automatically do the collision vertex by vertex, or tris by tris, and which could be quite useful for you. So that's the first thing I wanted to show you guys. Now the second thing is, for example, if you guys go to the foliage tool, and I can drag my mesh onto the foliage tool, and I can paint here. So now, right now, if I paint this, so show FPS, I'm trying to show my FPS as well. So this is already doing a lot for us. So it's now this is really useful. Of course, this is not how close together we want the trees to be, because this is just too dense, far too dense. So this is the basically foliage tool that you guys can use, and right now I will be editing the settings for this tool. Now of course the more you plant, the lower your FPS will go, but there are tricks to even have this many trees, as right now my FPS has dropped down to about 40 to 50 somewhere, depending on which side I look at the trees from. Now with 3.6K trees, I want to show you guys a thing that you could really still improve the performance that you have on these trees, which is a thing that you can do inside your main tree mesh. So if I double click and open this, so right now you guys can keep an eye on this number right here. So this is the tree from the vehicle demo, and the total number down here is 2353. So this is the trace, and this really affects how good of a performance you will get. Now if I show you guys can actually make, without having to do any work in a modeling software, Unreal Engine provides you this option to change how many traces you guys have down here. So number of LODs, if I turn this up to let's say 5, I can apply these changes, and then what I'll do is, because I don't want this number, so I'm not going to keep the original tree. So for that I will go to minimum LOD and I'll set this to 1, so the one which I assign myself. Now if I go down to the first LOD, so LOD 0 is the original, but I'm not going to mess around with that. I'm going to change the screen size to 1, it will make it 0.999, which is just fine. So now we start off with our first LOD, and already you guys can see that the trace has gone down to 470, and the tree doesn't look as bad as you would imagine. Now we'll go down to the reduction settings, and I'm going to turn up the, so 100% is obviously the same as original. So I'm going to turn this up to maybe 50 to see what it looks like. 50 looks quite decent, yeah. So for this, if you guys are seeing this lag, it's because I am recording at the same time as this, and sometimes my PC just goes crazy with lag. At other times this works really smoothly. So anyways, once you guys have turned this down a little, now of course your LOD1, now I think this looks pretty good for me, so I'm going to leave this down here. And for the second one, for LOD2 in the reduction settings, I'm going to turn this down to maybe about 25%. And the LOD2, the screen size. So the screen size really depends on how big the object is inside your scene. For example, if I move back away, it's not showing anything right now. But yeah, so this is LOD1, and for the LOD2, so I'll do about maybe 0.1. So when I reach 0.1 of the screen size, 0.1, I don't know how this is calculated, maybe percentage or something. So now it's changed to LOD2, which is down to 25%. I still have to apply changes, yeah. So I go quite close. Okay, so LOD4 is obviously, yeah, the screen size. So this I can change to maybe 0.01, just so we can see our LOD2. Yeah, so this is our LOD2. So now here I'm going to turn off all of these things, the texture, the shading and stuff. We don't really need that too much right now, and I'm going to turn up the pixel error to 40, that's the max, because really no one's really going to look at this tree from really close up. So LOD3 I'll do about 0.01, and then LOD4 I'll do about 0.001. So then we can, I think I can even turn down LOD2 even lower, so maybe 15. Yeah, it still looks quite decent. And you will notice when you go back to your thing, your FPS will improve significantly. Okay, so actually this I might do 0.5. Yeah, let's have a look. So when you really up close, it goes to LOD1. This is the LOD you can see here, these are the numbers. When you go slightly away, it goes to LOD2, still looks decent. And okay. And then we have our LOD3, I'll actually do 0.1. So it's all about getting it to look decent at least. Okay, and at a specific distance, the shadows start to disappear as well. So for my LOD3, what I want to do is I'll go to do about 10%. Let's have a look. Turn up the pixel error completely. Turn all these things off and apply changes. Now LOD3, even with 10%, you guys can still see that it looks pretty decent. So having the original mesh, no matter where you look at it from, is just a waste of resources when, even like this from far away, you can't tell too much of a difference. And then for the final LOD, which I guess I can do 0.01, I believe, yeah, 0.01. So if I go about to get to LED 4, yeah, so LED 4 is around here. I'm going to turn this down to maybe 5 even. Apply changes, and you can still see the tree pretty well, and the trace is now down to 117. And if you guys want to go even more overboard with this, you guys can actually make a plane and just have a cross plane with a texture, a simple screenshot texture of the tree or something, and then you guys can literally have like 4 trees. But that's depending on how big your scene really is and how much good of your performance you're looking for. So I'm going to turn up the pixel error to max, and in fact I believe we can have one more LODs. I'm going to turn this up to 6, apply changes, and for this one I'll do maybe 0.001. So let's see how far away we have to go for our LOD 5 to show up. If I do 0.005, yeah, so here we go. So for about here, it's gonna change to our LOD 5. Now, I believe we only done 5%. I'll do maybe 3%. Apply changes. Yeah, so 69, and you can still see the tree from this far away. In fact, I might even be able to go even lower. So 2. Yeah, I think 47 trees. That's decent enough. I'm gonna leave it at 2. So now if you go back to our scene and we take a look at the FPS, there we go. So from having about 30 to 40 FPS or somewhere in that range, now we're getting about just around 50, well 50 to 60 close to that number FPS. And if you go close, our trees still look quite decent. Our palm tree still looks quite decent. If you go really far away, our palm trees will still look quite decent. So if you go really high, in fact the further away you go, your FPS will actually improve, because now it's the last LED that's actually showing up. And one more thing you guys should keep in mind, my FPS is also going to be dependent on, because I'm recording, so it's not going to show the accurate amount, and inside your scene it will always show a lower FPS than it should be in your release game. And my setting, just to let you guys know, I am using Epic, so this is the FPS I'm getting at Epic right now. So now I'm going to remove these. So I'm going to select this tree, make sure it's checked down here. I'm going to do this lasso select tool, and then I'm going to use the brush, and I'm going to select these trees, drag the brush around on the trees, and I am going to press delete. Okay, and then of course we have this one tree here. You can just select this and press delete. So now we'll look at some of the properties inside our tree down here, so inside our paint tool. Okay, so inside our paint tool, first thing we have is density, is how many trees you want, how many instances you want per 1000 times 1000 area, unit area. Now this is a value that could be quite useful, but the real value I want to look at is radius here. So radius, for example, if I do 100 radius, so that's 100 radius between each tree. So now if I plant my trees, they aren't as close together as they were last time. To show the exact difference, I'll turn this up to 1000. So this is up to 100 and this is up to 1000. And now our trees have a lot of distance between them. So this is a really useful tool if you want to choose how much distance your trees should actually have between them. So for this, I'm going to press Ctrl Z twice to make these go away. I'm going to turn this up to about 500. Now if I plant these, I think I get a nice nice thing going here. So now if you take the camera through these, we have a nice looking forest. But there's still something else we need to do to add some variation to these trees. We don't want them all the same height, looking like the same. So what we can do there is we can change the scale X. So the minimum we can say, if I say 0.5, you should really be able to tell the difference. Now if I plant these trees, you guys can instantly see that they all have a random size between these two values, between 0.5 and 1. Which is really useful, as now it's added a lot more variety to your scene. Now I guess you could take it even like one more step further. The random pitch angle we can do 5 maybe. So I'm not sure if I can show that, demonstrate that here, but so there's all these options that you guys can play around with to get the random. Yeah, so I believe the random pitch is the way it actually faces. So now not every tree is actually facing in the same direction. So these are all these settings you guys can actually play around with. And then if I go down, one more thing actually, so now if I plant these, I'm just going to plant these now, I'm not going to delete them again. So I'm just going to plant all of these trees around here. Okay. Now of course right now I'm not having much issues, lag issues or anything while I'm planting, because there's not that much going on and all of them have LOD set up. So now there is obviously a way sometimes when you try to do the LODs inside Unreal Engine, because Unreal Engine does not know what your object is actually like or how you want it to look. So the LODs might not look very good, in which case you might have to use Blender or Maya or something to make your level of details. Okay, so now I'm quite happy with these trees. I'm getting about 75 FPS, 75 to 80 FPS. Now there's one issue that we need to overcome. So now if I click play, so the ground has collision. This is a landscape. It's quite nice. Now if I walk into a tree, there's no collision. I can literally walk through all of these trees. So we need to sort this out, because in an actual game or in your scene, whatever you guys are working on, if a player can walk through trees, that's just not going to work at all. For this, we'll also go to our Foliage tool. We'll click on our tree. Currently we have 3.32k trees without much lag issues. You want to scroll down to collision, and as you can see right now we have no collision. So down here we can choose a collision option. For this I'll just do block all. I'm just going to click save just in case. Now if we click play, we walk into a tree, and a tree has a predefined collision. We can walk all around it, and this is a lovely feature to add for the collision. Yep. So already we have a decent looking forest to ourselves. Now if you guys want to make some like parts and stuff, you guys can just go to the select tool, just change the size, maybe delete a few trees. For example, let's say you want to have a part going from here to here, perhaps a path like this. You guys can delete some trees, and then you guys can add some rows or whatever. In my case, I could just paint the sorry, if I just paint the grass layer all over here, I'm gonna turn up the tool strength. Okay, so if I have, like, let's say this kind of like a foresty grass, kind of brownish grass layer, and then if I go to base texture for my example, I can just make a base texture here, which kind of starts to make a nice looking path for your character to walk on. And of course if you go closer, now this is a thing where the texture is blending in. Now, obviously I did not make this texture, sorry, this landscape material. I'll let you guys know this already, but I could maybe in the future I'll make a tutorial on how to make something similar to this. I also have a log ray here, so you guys can add rocks around the path as well. Okay, so now so obviously I've done the basic on how you guys can set up LODs, so you can actually afford having large areas with lots of static meshes. Of course you guys can add other trees and stuff as well. For example, down here I have other meshes that I could actually add down here as well, which I actually will add. So I'm just gonna add these here as well, and in these, of course you want to make sure first of all that the sizing is right. For example, this tree is actually smaller than the standard of those trees. I'm going to deselect this, so I don't want this spawning again. So now I can delete this, and now I know if I go to my paint tool that this needs to be about 2 times. So the max is 2, and I'll do 1.5 for the minimum. And then this queen palm tree I have down here. Yeah, this one. So I can drag this out as well, and this is even smaller, so this I need to make about 3 times as big to correspond to the height of the other trees. I'll go back to my Foliage tool, I'll make the max about 3, and then 2 actually, I'll do 2 minimum. And of course now we want these to also not be clustered up, so we'll change this value. This one will do about 500, this one I'll do about 800. And this one I'll do about 1000. Alright, and of course we'll set up the collision. So collision, block all, collision, block all. Once again, You will have to do the level of details for these. As many plants as you add, you want to make sure you do the level of details, because these are roughly the same as this original mesh, and that will probably cause a lot of lag issues if you guys just plant them in here straight away. Now sometimes there can be some overlapping issues with your tree, so you guys just have to be just have to watch out for that. The foliage tool is quite good in the things it can achieve, but it's not the best, I would say. There are probably a few other methods you guys can use. Of course, manual planting is one option, or you will have to go through a lengthy blueprints or things like that to achieve a good result. So now instantly we have some variety of colors and trees in our scene, but as you guys can see, our FPS are dropping. The more trees we plant, the more our FPS will drop. In fact, now it's even, okay, now I've come down to about 40 FPS. Now we can do a quick fly through our trees to see what it looks like. So all in all, I guess not too bad, right? But I'll leave the, since I've shown you guys how to do the collisions for these, I'll leave those, I'll do them in my own time, I'll skip and I'll be back. But next thing I want to show you right now is adding a post-process volume. Now a post-process volume you can access from your modes. If you have closed your modes by accident, you can't find them, just go to Windows and just click modes here, and it will show you where it is, or it will open a new window for you. So visual effects, post-process volume, you can just drag it out in the scene. Now generally, whatever you change in this post-process volume will only affect what's inside it. For example, if I take my camera inside it, I go to the settings, I can go to the white balance and I can change this, and you can see everything's gone blue now. As soon as I leave, it's not affecting anything anymore. So now I want, for example, in this scene, I want this to affect the whole of my scene. So what I'll do is I'll just go to unbound, and now it's affecting globally everything. This is a cool little trick you guys can use for your post-process volume. And I'm just gonna change the temperature now. I don't know why, but I personally like to have my temperature around this area. It gives you like that nice look, kind of like a sunset or like a morning. Look, I'm gonna turn this off for now. And one thing I really like to do is I like to go to my film, to my saturation, and turn this up. I just like when it looks a lot more colorful. I just like my scene that way. I don't know why I like it, but I just do. But it's up to you guys. So saturation really depends on how much color there is in your scene. And here is another tip: you guys can turn this down to 0 to achieve a black and white kind of look. The saturation, I like my scene to be highly saturated. Contrast is kind of make your scene darker in a way. And yeah, contrast we can turn off, and then we have some motion blur, so we can add these settings. We can turn these settings up. We have a depth of field. There's different types of blurs that you guys can use. You guys can go to near transition, or how. So this will change these things on how far it actually starts, how far the blurring starts, and everything. And you guys can actually achieve quite cool results. But I'm not going to go too much into that right now. This is something you guys need to play around with to get it to look how you want it to look. And we have, of course, we have a lens flare intensity. If I can find my sun. Yeah, so this is what lens flare does. Kind of adds this cool effect where there's a light, well, lens flare. I guess it stands for what it is. And then we have a bloom. So if you go to our bloom settings, intensity, if you turn this up, you can see what this does. This makes every bright color even more brighter. And if you turn this down, it takes away that brightness completely. So keep it somewhere to reasonable amount. And scene color, we can apply a random color, I guess, if you guys like it to be perhaps more green, more blue, whatever color you want it to be. Change. And white balance again. You can turn this up, down. So this would kind of like determine, perhaps a cold morning would be, I don't know how colors really work, but yeah. So you guys can play around with these settings as well. And then yeah, so this was the some of the post-process settings that we just looked at. And now now you guys also want to add, perhaps you want to add some more detail to your ground. So for this, you guys can actually, in my case, for example, I could just go to paint and maybe like add some blends between. So if I turn down the tool settings, I can add some blends between rocks and grass and stuff and everything. So yeah, this is it. So now if you go really far away, you can see our scene looks quite decent right now. And if I go back to my meshes, my content browser, I have a few other things here, and there's also another thing we can add. We can go to our particles. Now these I'm using from the Zen Garden, which is also available from Unreal Engine. I believe it was a feature from one of the things. So you can add some birds. Now these birds actually come from the Zen Garden, so we can add some birds to add some life to our scene, add some distant birds, or some, yeah. Now these birds will just keep circling around the scene, and we can also add an orbit here. Yep. And if you think they're a little too small, you guys can literally just drag this up, make this bigger, and now we have some birds in our scene as well. You guys can also add sounds and everything, and of course the more stuff you have down here, the better it will actually start to look. So now if I go to my meshes again, I can add perhaps these will normally be in a desert, but then again, so would a lot of palm trees be. So this again, I can do maybe 100, and I can just start planting this as well, or perhaps just a little too close, so 300. And then one more thing that would really be cool in this case is, once I planted these, it looks quite decent. Now you guys can also add some grass. There's some really cool grass that actually comes with the Kite demo. If you guys just make a few LOD adjustments to it, that grass actually looks really good. In fact, what I'm going to do right now is, I have another project open here. I'll just show you guys how you guys can migrate assets between different projects as well. So I am using the grass down here. I'm using some of the Kite demo stuff in this example, in this thing that I was working on earlier on. So what I'll do right now is I'll go to my content browser. I'll just find the grass. So in my static mesh, now here I have all the different assets from all the different things that Unreal Engine has provided. Some assets I made myself, and some I downloaded, which were made available by the community. So I'm just gonna type grass here. Yeah, so this is the grass. So what you can do is just, if you guys find anything you like, oh, by the way, one more cool thing. If you guys have played the game Neighbor, this is the grass that they've used in there, and it's actually available for free on the Unreal Engine forum. Someone made it available a few years ago. So if you guys have ever seen that game, you guys will notice that this is the same grass that they use in there. So just a cool little thing that I want to share you guys with you guys. Now to migrating assets. So this thing, you just select a mesh, whatever you want to migrate. You can select different or multiple of them. You can go to asset actions, click on migrate. Now this will tell you, so everything that's linked to this grass will be migrated with it. So press OK, and then find your project, whichever one you're working on right now. You need to make sure you have content selected, or else it will not export properly. Press OK, and it tells you it's been exported properly. Now if I go back to my my other scene, which is, I believe, the other scene, yeah. So this scene right here. So now if I go to my content and I go to Kite demo, and there we have it. So we have some grass in here now, so the field grass. So now we can also plant some grass as well. Okay, now some of these things do have some decent amount of LEDs already set up, the Unreal Engine stuff that comes in the demos, but you guys can always improve. Since it's your game, you want to make sure that you guys get it to look really good. Now the next thing I'll show you guys is, if you go to our light source, we can change this from stationary to movable. And look at the shadows, just have a look. From static, it looks pretty good, but then when your leaves move, it will not show much because it's a still shadow. From stationary, doesn't look that great. Movable, all of a sudden, all your shadows actually start to move and your scene suddenly looks, I would say, pretty good. So yeah, this is another cool tip, just change your thing to movable. Now if we click play, our shadow actually moves as well, so our shadow now is also dynamic, it's not static anymore. So yeah, we can move around our scene, and then we can also go to our skylight, we can also change this to movable, and then we have some nice looking shadows again. And we can move around our forest. Next thing we can do is we can go back to our modes, we can go to visual effects, we can add some fog. So not atmospheric, I'm going to add some exponential height fog. And now we have a cool effect where you guys can obviously choose how much opacity you want or the start distance of the fog. So start distance, if you turn this value, so right now it's starting from right wherever your viewpoint is, so wherever your camera is. As you go up, it will start to move in, you can see more of the area more clearly, and then there's fog at the back. I'm gonna do this about maybe 500, 1k, okay, so 1k works pretty good. Fog density really determines how strong of a fog you have around. And if you want to change your sun's position, what you do is you go to your light source and you press E, you rotate it, and you will see the shadows change. So around here the shadows change quite a bit. And now if you click on your sun and refresh material right here, you'll see your sky, and your sun has now changed position. And now you get a really different type of a look. If I go back to my post-process volume, if you want the scene to be a little, perhaps, darker, you guys can actually turn up the contrast a little bit, and things will start to look very different all of a sudden. Perhaps about 0.2, yeah. And then I'll just change my bloom a little bit, I'll see what looks good. Yeah, so this is basically what I wanted to show you guys, some optimization settings for your scene, however you guys want. And we have a decent looking forest scene here. Now of course the more stuff you add, of course make sure, and right now I'm getting a solid 70 to 80 FPS, that's with recording as well. So and now my computer obviously is not beastie at all, it's about a 3-year-old custom built. And yeah, so this is basically it. And now what I'll do right now is I'll just add a lot more stuff to make it look a lot cooler, and which obviously doesn't it's just literally placing objects and changing the LOD settings, and then I'll probably add that in the intro. So this is it guys, this is basically it, how you can optimize your scene to look quite well. And thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.